person's yard is 1.32 acres. That's his yard. And then everybody else that comprises of the 20 acres. And I also want to make a point about fracking. I had a conversation with Mr. Douglas Gonzalez, who owns Gonzoil. And with this frack water, once again, just so you know, I know we talk a lot about water contamination, and mind you, since I live in a city, we don't have well water, thankfully, with this situation going on. But that's not the only concern here. The frack water, you have millions of gallons of water that are just literally pushed through we're right now with Clinton sandstone, pushed through with sand, and toxic carcinogenic chemicals are also mixed in this. When they extract the frack water, according to Mr. Gonzalez, only 55% of the frack water is brought back out of our earth. 45% is still in there, and it's going to stay in there. So in my city right now, we have 90 wells. 45% of frack water is here, 45 here, 45 there, and eventually it's all going to mesh together, and we're going to have one big area about 3,900 feet down of all contaminated land. So that's what we're having to contend with. And also air quality. I've been trying to get a direct answer from the Ohio EPA as well as from the Cleveland Health Department and the local air quality. According to the Ohio EPA, each gas and oil company is supposed to pull an air permit for production. Production is when they're extracting crude oil, gas, and brine. To date, in Broadview Heights, there's not one company that has pulled an air permit. And I'm still trying to get a straight answer this week from these individuals. So it's not only your water, but it's the air. I have a 5-year-old. I left my house when they drilled, and I'm leaving my house when they frack. Because according to Dr. Theo Colburn, she has her own organization. She's an endocrinologist. She stated that nobody should be living within 1,000 feet of a drill pad because of the toxicities that are being emitted from the well during fracking, during the drilling, and just the existence of it. So I don't know how prevalent it is in Medina, but I just wanted to share what's going on in the city. It doesn't have to be 40 acres, it could be 20 acres depending on the company. And when they come in, they're going to just drill your entire city until there's no more land, and then they're going to move on to the next city.
Thank you, Michelle. And just so that you understand, they have to have 20 acres to drill down 4,000 feet. They have to have 40 acres to drill past 4,000 feet. And all of the unconventional horizontal wells are usually lower and deeper than 4,000. So they would require the 40 acres. So now I'm just going to spend a few minutes and answer that lady's question over there about regulations. And she had some good questions about regulations. Federal exemptions. Probably people know this already. Oil and gas is one of the only industries, but I believe the only industry that is exempt from the Clean Water Act amendments, the Clean Air Act amendments, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Toxic Release Inventory, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and the Superfund Act. So this is very disconcerting because you realize that it's very, if they're not being followed, if these rules and regulations aren't being followed, it's very difficult, as Michelle was talking about, just to even figure out air pollution and that sort of thing if they're not part of the Clean Air Act. So we look to our local government, but unfortunately our local governments can't help because in 2004 Ohio passed House Bill 278, which took away all local control and gave all the power to people in Columbus to regulate the permitting, location, drilling, and operation of oil and gas wells in Ohio. That even includes zoning. So it used to be like in Broadview Heights in Michelle's community, there was no drilling in a residential area, but you could drill in an industrial or commercial area. And they took that all away in 2004, and so now all land is available. Put together, in her case, for the shallower conventional wells, 20 acres, have at it. You can drill a well. It'll be 100 feet from people's homes. So everything's concentrated now at the state level, and Ohio Revised Code 1509 is the section that you would look if you wanted to look at any of the regulations. It was revised with Senate Bill 165, and while there was some improvement in terms of enforcement, so once a company has done something wrong, terrible, such as blowing up the house in Bainbridge in 2007 and contaminating 20 people's water wells, they'll have some enforcement capability afterward. Unfortunately, there were many, many areas that were left unaddressed, and there are no specific regulations for this type of unconventional hydrofracking rules. I'll go through this very quickly, but just so that you know some of the areas that are insufficient in the current regulation. As I've said, in urban areas, it's 150 feet from an occupied dwelling, but in a rural area, for some reason, it's only 100 feet for a place of worship or a private dwelling. Unfortunately, when a well tank explodes, it can explode 400 feet away. We have seen this in Carroll County in Ohio in just the last couple of years. We have a number of cases where tanks and billboard-sized pieces of concrete and so forth have exploded hundreds of feet. And yet the Ohio legislature has kept the setback at 100 feet. These are the open air pits. This was taken from Google Earth. You're actually able to see an open air pit from Google Earth. When they drill, the drilling muds and fracking fluid come into this pit, as well as a frac fluid that comes back out right after they drill, and it goes into these pits. And those little white things are misters, so that it evaporates the water. So, but unfortunately, also some of the evaporation of the toxic chemicals can come out as well. And in the far bottom left, that little squiggle white line, and then those little tiny little squares are homes. And this is from Pennsylvania. I spoke briefly about just with setbacks, but there are many regulations between urban and rural areas that are different. So urban has more stringent drilling regulations than rural areas. And it's defined, rural areas defined as a township with fewer than 5,000 people. And so terms and conditions that don't apply, safety concerns, the drilling of a well, protection of the public and private water supply, noise mitigation, there's no notification for landowners, and there's no site review required. This is what we talked about before regarding mandatory pooling, which is the taking of an individual person's property against their wishes for private profit. We have eminent domain in Ohio, but that's usually for a public good of some type. But this is very unique in that it's for private profit. The U.S. Department of Energy panel also made recommendations that would show that ODNR regulations are insufficient. They recommend to reduce emissions of air pollutants. They talk about inspections at safety at critical stages during the hydraulic fracturing process. In